Because I look at people and I was like, you were dumb enough to do it. Deal with it.
Facebook is drama. It's high school drama. It really is. How many pastors have gotten in trouble because of Facebook?
Yeah. Right.
How many marriages got in trouble with Facebook?
Right.
I don't do Facebook.
I was helping with the youth one day. I looked around. I thought, my pacemaker's older than every kid in here. You know? Yeah.
I think a lot of Americans, even, dare I say, American Christians, I say that loosely, will sell their souls to maintain a lifestyle if it comes down to that. And that, I think, is very dangerous.
One of the things that Verna and I have done over the years when we find ourselves in difficult situations is that we will go through the litany of the various times that God has helped us. And we express those out loud to each other, and they serve as a reminder to us that God was through us in this situation, and this situation, and this situation. What makes us think he's not going to be with us in this one as well?
The next week after that first state championship game, they joined the church. And their words were this: you cared enough to drive 6 hours for a kid that's not yours. That tells me something.
Hi, I'm Chris McNeil, and this is Ministry on the Move, a podcast interviewing pastors and ministers across the USA. As the father of the McNeils, I get to travel across the country singing the gospel, and one day it occurred to me that you all need to know each other. You are a part of the extended McNeil family and the body of Christ. Join me on a journey to churches of all shapes and sizes, different parts of the country, and see just what it takes to shepherd the body of Christ. For more information on the McNeils, you can visit us at mcneilmusic.tv or mcneilmusic.com. Thanks for joining us, and here's the episode. Well, hello, y'all. This is Chris. This is Ministry on the Move. It is good to be back. One of the things that I've kind of learned in season 2 is that it's much easier for me to do the interviews, and then I come home, and in my spare time, I edit them. And then when I get to the point where I'm running out of episodes that are already dropped, and I'm coming to the end of those, then I sort of turn my attention and do a whole batch of the intros and polish them up and put them out on the internet. And today is that day. So it feels like it's been a while since I've talked to you. So I hope that you're enjoying this. Thank you for sticking with me for these episodes. We continue to look for ways to improve this thing. And if you have suggestions or comments, I sure hope that you would take the time to drop me a line, chris@mcneilmusic.com. Just let me know where you're listening from. Just say, hey, it's, I see numbers. I don't know the people. So always good to hear from you. This episode is the first part of a 2-part interview with Pastor Chris Wilcut of Grawood Baptist in Shreveport, Louisiana. Now, the McNeils were not at Grawood. We did a revival in Brashear, Texas, which is just outside of Sulphur Springs. And Chris was preaching on, I think, Sunday morning and Sunday night. And so I got him Sunday afternoon, and we sat down. And, Chris is a guy who knows why he's following Jesus, because he knows what he was rescued from. And so his testimony is pretty amazing, and our conversation was really good. So thanks so much for listening, and without further ado, here is the episode. Hey, y'all, this is Chris McNeil, Ministry on the Move, and today my guest with me is Chris Wilcut. And Chris, you're the pastor of a church in Shreveport, that's right?
Yep, that's right.
I wrote it down even, but
Grawood Baptist Church.
Thank you. And the funny thing is, the McNeils are not at, what was it, Grawood?
Grawood,
yeah. We're not even in Louisiana. We're in Texas.
That's
we're both in Texas. So we're doing a revival at Brashear Baptist, just outside of Sulphur Springs.
Yep.
and you're the speaker, the preacher on Sunday morning and Sunday
That's right.
evening.
That's right.
And I think you said this morning that you were 48 years old. And how long have you been in the ministry?
Let's see. I started probably in my late 20s. Late 20s, early 30s is when I started.
So you've been doing this almost for 20 years.
It's been a minute. It's been a minute.
But it wasn't like it was right out of college.
No, I mean, I didn't go to college until after I'd gotten married. So like I was in construction. I was a carpenter, and then kind of felt the tug of ministry and not knowing how to deal with that. And of course, the guy that's coming after me, Bob, he was kind of pivotal in helping me understand my calling and kind of helping me navigate through those thoughts and those, I guess, ideas that I had about ministry that, I can look back and go, you were an idiot.
Weren't we all? I have noticed, now I'm 58. I just turned 58 on Tuesday. So I'm 10 years.
Happy birthday. Happy late birthday.
Thanks very much. 10 years older than you. And I'm beginning to think that the back half of our life is given to us for those of us that are allowed to live, I don't know, say past 45.
Sure.
For the Lord to allow us of our own free will and accord to realize what dumb butts we are.
Yeah. I'm the chiefest of those.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of dumb things. Predominantly, well, some people may disagree, but predominantly in my youth ministry days, I've done a lot of dumb things.
I mean, even if you're in the ministry, we can be jackwagons or.
Well, I mean, we're imperfect people anyway.
Yeah.
Like you try to look at people and go, can you just show me this? Like when I was a youth minister, people showed me all kinds of grace because I think they view that position as immaturity or whatever, or he's going to get there. But I was still in my 30s when I was a youth minister. So, I mean, I appreciate the grace, but I don't know what you're expecting me to mature towards.
Right. I am an adult at this point.
I mean, at this stage, I've got two small children, at home, and I'm still doing youth ministry and still making some dumb mistakes and trying to navigate through that. And then all of a sudden you become a pastor and there's not as much grace.
I had because you're kind of responsible
for the whole.
Yeah. I had a very influential man in my life tell me, he said that he was 50 before he realized that not everybody thought the way he did.
Yeah. Like you spend your time preaching and you look at people and go, I don't understand why you're not getting it. And, I've had to come to the conclusion that they're just simply not going to see what I see. And that's okay. And sometimes I'm not going to see what they see.
All right.
And I just got to be okay with that.
So as a pastor, how does that affect the way, you were talking this morning about how the culture moves and that was an interesting point. You were talking this morning about how our culture moves and how it's sort of needful for us to, in one sense, we have to move with it.
Sure.
But in a very real other sense, we cannot.
That's right.
Move with it. There are certain things as a Christian that we're called to.
Sure.
That are non-negotiables. How do you then, as a pastor, and I think by and large, probably more than 50% of the people that listen to this podcast are pastors.
Yeah.
So they're interested in what everybody else thinks. And one of the things that I love about this, I think all you guys should know each other, and you've never been in the same room. So this is my way.
We'll see each other one day.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, you were on that silly little podcast that nobody listens to. But as a pastor, how do you sort of navigate that fine line between we've got to change and be like the culture versus we cannot change and be like the culture?
I think Jesus was part of the culture. Clearly, Jesus was part of the culture. And and he adapted to that. But he understood also that there were lines that you just don't do. Like trying to run everything. You should be, as pastors, we should be running everything through the gospel. Because the gospel never tells us to compromise, the gospel, but that we're called to reach people. And that means having conversations with people. That means learning about them. That means caring enough more than just a conversion. Like caring enough about them to know their story, to know who they are, what they do, what makes them tick, you name it. And the unfortunate thing is I don't know that people feel like they have a whole lot of time to spend that kind of time getting to know people. Because I have a lot of people in my life, and I genuinely want to know them. Like I want to know them. I don't want it to be surface level relationships.
Right.
I've got enough of those. I mean, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I want to have genuine conversations and genuinely care about people. And they know where I stand on certain things. Like, an example of that is, I have people in my life that I know that are lost. I don't have to beat them over the head and tell them that they're going to hell. I mean, if the gospel comes up, then we're going to talk about those things, but they know where I stand and they know that I love them. So when I see them, when I talk to them, call them on the phone, whatever, I'm asking about them. I want to know about them because I think the gospel is active. I don't think it's just a stagnant thing that you just present to somebody and that's it. It's something that has to be lived out. It's something that has to be spoke about. It's something that you should be modeling to those people in your life around you, always. And so I've got people that, they're, for all practical purposes, they're practicing homosexuals or pagan or Muslim or whatever that I have conversations with, and they're day-to-day operation conversations. And I just simply love them in the hopes that at some point I will get to share Jesus with them. And eventually, if the Lord allows it, and I believe that He will, you'll be able to have those conversations with people. But I don't think it's just to add another notch in your belt to say, oh, I led this many. Well, first of all, you didn't lead anybody to Christ. It was the Holy Spirit that led them.
Right.
You're just the vocal.
You're the conduit.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Which of those three do you think is and I guess the answer would be different for anybody, is the most easy to talk to? You listed a homosexual, a pagan, and a Muslim?
Yeah.
Were those the three?
Yeah.
I think those three, those really kind of...
It's a broad spectrum.
Well, but I think it very well characterizes the options available outside of Christianity.
Sure.
You have a hedonism.
Yeah.
You've got, in paganism, you have a spirituality that defies God, right? Is fully aware of who He is.
Sure.
And yet chooses one of the other spirits.
Sure.
To follow. And then Muslim is straight out of the Judaic tradition, right? So you've got something in common,
Sure.
and yet nowhere near enough.
Right.
Which is the easiest to talk to and have that open, transparent. I'm not judge. I know you don't want to judge anybody, but the fact of the matter is, we think we have the right way.
Right.
Yeah. So
I think for me personally, just because of my background, it's easier for me to have conversations with someone who would be considered pagan or not necessarily religious and all that, because that's the kind of lifestyle that I came from. And so, having conversations with them and trying to lead to deeper conversations about morality and about who God is, and is there a creator, and it seems a lot less difficult to engage those particular individuals than it is for people that are set in a particular religion, that have been trained and quite frankly, would probably put Christianity or most Christians to shame because of the things that they know that Christians, the average Christian, don't know because they just don't care to know. For the pagan or for the non-believer or whatever you want to call him, they're just living life, and they just want people to live life with. So I can hang out with. It's easier for me to hang out with those guys because I was one of those guys. I wasn't ever a Muslim, and I was never a practicing homosexual. So like for me personally, it was easier for me to engage those individuals because I was that particular individual. I was just living a life for myself, and it was I already know what's going on in their mind. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
So it was easy for me to just go, okay, I get it, and just live life with them. I don't have to partake in the things that they partake in.
Oh right.
But I get to hang out with them, and I get to build a relationship with them, and I get to the hopes that at some point I get to invite them into a safe space. And when if by some chance they actually humor me and show up, for church or whatever, I still try to protect that. Like I still want them sitting next to me to where nobody says anything ridiculous. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because I've worked hard to try to do my best to model Jesus to the best of my ability.
Right.
Even in my stupid moments, I try to model Jesus to the best of my ability. I'm trying to be successful at that. I'm not always successful, and so I try to protect that particular scenario if they humor me and show up at church or whatever.
So you talked a little bit about, you said that, I guess you said something like you could relate to them. And then this morning you gave a very, it's what I call a hard open.
Yeah, cried. Who cries on the opening lines? Okay. Goodness.
But I'd be really curious if you wouldn't mind sharing with this crowd the story that you started the service with this morning.
So, brief synopsis. My mom had me when she was 17. She got pregnant out of wedlock, and she just basically kind of just dumped me wherever she could dump me. And so I grew up. She would disappear for a few weeks, and I grew up. Eventually I'd come home from school and I'd be loaded up in a car, and we would track her down, and we'd find her. And my responsibility, even as far back as I can remember, like 6 years old, I guess 5 years old, was to grab her legs while another family member grabbed her up under the arms, and we would take her to the car and we'd load her up, and she'd come home and she'd sober up, and she would be verbally abusive, physically abusive, stuff like that. So
she was incapacitated.
Yeah, she was just trashed completely. Like it was just, and looking back on it now, like, I see it as a generational thing because it kind of happened to my grandmother, but my grandmother escaped from that and had some semblance of Christianity. Because my grandmother was the one that kind of introduced me to Jesus, and I didn't want to hear all of that. Like, I didn't know my dad. I didn't meet my dad till I was 43 years old.
Oh, wow.
Because of a DNA test that I joked with my wife about. I wonder when I'm going to die. And so she bought me this 23andMe. This isn't a plug for 23andMe. I'm not saying that because I think they're going bankrupt. But I just hope they don't sell my DNA. But I met my dad for the first time. Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, I'm being cloned right now. God help the world. But I met him for the first time, and he didn't know anything about me. Like, my mom and them were just kind of vagabonds. They kind of just went from, I continuously, this whole scenario of moving over, a few months at a time and stuff like that. Anyways, so I grew up and didn't like God, blamed him for misery and blamed him for all of that stuff. And so I tried to, that longing, that deep longing for something more. I tried to fill it with women. I tried to fill it with money. I tried to fill it with, popularity and all sorts of things. And it just kind of came to like nothingness. And I thought, and I know that this is about to sound absolutely horrible, and I've since asked for forgiveness, but like I was committed to committing suicide, and I couldn't think of a better Christmas present to give my mom than my body and a suicide note. That was horrible. Like but I was in that kind of misery. And then
How old were you?
I was 20, 22, 21, something like that. And by the time I was 21, I had done probably a lot more than, a lot of 26, 27-year-olds. It's not something to be proud about, mind you, but like, I don't know. Like I was 21 and I was getting ready just to be done with it. And I just happened to look over, and I told y'all this morning, I'm like, who gives a 6-year-old, because I remember my grandmother giving it to me, who gives a 6-year-old a King James Version Bible? I don't have a clue. I don't know what she was thinking, but I know this. I know that throughout my young life, she would make me memorize verses. And I had to humor the old lady, and I would memorize them, whatever. I got a photographic memory, so it wasn't hard. So that's the only references I had in the Bible when I, before I offed myself, so to speak. I just picked up the Bible, and I was angry, and I flipped to the only things. I looked in the table of contents and found, Romans, and I read the verses that my grandmother had made me memorize. And apparently she's smarter than the average bear, because she made me memorize the Romans Road. And I just remember it wasn't in front of people or anything like that. I just began to weep and beg God. And I think my salvation prayer was, Lord, save me or let me die, but something has to change. And something did that night. The dysfunction around me didn't change, but something changed in me, and I've never looked back. Like, I've had some hard things happen, but I've never looked back, and I've never looked at it and said, man, I really wished I could go back to the hedonism or whatever. Right. I'd really like to go back to the club. I'm too old for the club, by the way. I'm just, I can't shake what my mama gave me anymore without pulling something. So, I'm good, man. Like, I'm so thankful that Jesus saved me. Because back in the day, I could get in. Like, if I knew people, they'd let me in to club, or they'd let me in here or there, and they didn't care. They just come on in, because I was the size of a starting middle linebacker for the NFL. Like, right. Something happened, and I remember, honestly, sharing the gospel with one of my friends probably 2 or 3 days later for the first time. I didn't know how to share the gospel. Mm-hmm. The only thing I could tell him was that something happened to me, and it changed my life forever. And he looked at me, and he laughed, and he said, "You'll be back."
Oh, wow.
And like, I've never forgotten that. And that's 27 years ago. And if by some chance that friend stumbles across this, you're wrong. So
praise God.
Yeah, you were wrong. And so I started this journey, and then I didn't know where to go. I didn't. Church wasn't an option because I was skeptical of the church.
Well, and as I think you said, and I was going to ask you, I want you to tell the 3 strikes.
Strike number 1 is getting kicked out of VBS. I deserved it.
And you were 8?
I was like 8. Yeah, I deserved it. I would have probably sent me home too, so I can't blame the church. I'm not mad. The second strike was I show up at a revival.
Wait, hold on. Why were you kicked out of the VBS? You got to tell the story.
Okay, yeah. So I rolled off all the tissue paper and shoved it like down in the toilets and flushed the toilets until they overflowed. And so I remember the phone call that my grandmother got, and I could hear the lady. Miss Wilcut, you're not allowed. Your grandson is not allowed back at our VBS. And she said, "Why?" I remember getting my rear end tore up because I just flooded apparently not just the bathroom. So, that was strike one for the church. All right. And it was my fault. But I'm just like, I don't know. Like I was.
But you were disinvited to come here anymore.
Oh, yeah. They were there. They had already wrote me off. Like they just said,
Yeah,
no, this kid's going to hell. There's not
His gold star is not being in his seat.
No, I would have gotten a negative dojo for real. And I know some of you don't know what a dojo is, but my son gets them occasionally, and it is not good when he comes home. So I would have gotten the negative points. So second time I was invited to, honestly, I was invited to a revival. I was 15, and geez, like my good friend, he prayed to receive Christ. And I remember the evangelist. I remember everything.
Is this before 20?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So I was a teenager.
Yeah.
And he invited me, and my mom happened to come along with me. And by that time, my mom was in her probably 30s, or early 30s, whatever. She'd kind of sobered up. But by that time, like, she couldn't be my parent. Like, she just couldn't. I wasn't going to allow her to be my parent because, like, I have a sister who's 9 years younger than me. I have several now that I figured that out because of the DNA test. But my sister that I grew up with, she was 9 years younger than me. So by the time my sister came along, my mom had started kind of getting her life a little bit better and sobering up and leaving stuff alone. And so we went to a revival, my mom and me. And I remember my friend, the evangelist, gave the altar call, and my friend came forward. And the first thing, like when I got invited, they took me into a youth group. And so anybody listening, understand that you must be able to practice what you preach. Because I walked into that youth group at 15, I was probably 15 or 16, somewhere along in there, and I recognized some of those people. Mm-hmm. I recognized some of those people as the people that I saw on Friday night. Some of the people that I saw on Saturday night.
Right.
And I looked around and I thought, I know what you were doing on Friday night. It wasn't this. Right. I know what you're doing on Saturday night, and it wasn't this. So, like, this whole Jesus thing was really, in my mind, it was a joke. Like, don't talk to me about Jesus. Like, you certainly wasn't. I didn't have any really clue what Jesus was like, but if that's Jesus, then I've got him. I'm good. I don't need this Jesus to, quote unquote, influence me or whatever. So I saw that, and that was probably, that was a foul tip. We'll call that a foul tip, all right? And so we walk into this sanctuary, and there's this older guy who is preaching revival, and it's hellfire and brimstone. And he is just yelling. And he stops it, and he goes, "There's one more person that needs to pray to receive Christ." And he looked dead at me. And I'm like, "Oh, man, you don't have a clue. I'm not giving my life. Like, you lost your mind." And so I gripped that pew, and, of course, it was all said and done, over with. And my friend's mom, the friend that had prayed to receive Christ, we're standing around, and she looks at me and she says, "Chris, when are you going to make your mom proud?" And instantaneously, like I told you this morning, instantaneously there was a lot of profanities came to my mind at that time. And because I'd been fighting for my mom's attention and fighting for my mom's approval, since as far back as I could remember, I wanted to be more important than her boyfriends. I wanted to be more important than the drugs. I wanted to be more important than the alcohol. And I wasn't. And when she said that, I was like, that's what I've got to do.
Right.
Like that's what I'm, so that it comes with conditions. And so there was this picture of a conditional, if I do this, then this is going to happen. I'm like, I'm not willing to do that. I'm good. I didn't need her before, and I don't need her now. And I didn't need God before, and I don't need him now. And so I walked away. Like I just walked away, and I did my own thing and got into trouble and continued to do my own thing and hang out with the wrong people. And, it led me to a place of, loneliness, discontent with life. And I thought the only solution, because I was really, I was really convinced that I was going to either be dead by the age of 30 or in prison. Like, that was the goal. Preferably death before prison. Yeah. But, like, I look back and I think, man, God had to have a sense of humor when he created me, because he knew I was a stubborn person. And I can still to this day, if I close my eyes, I can tell you everything from the quietness of the room to the blanket that was on my bed. I can tell you all of that. Like, it's just a picture. And I just said, save me or let me die. And I said, something has to change. And I said, I was like, God, I if you're really there, like, I need something. And I was like, I just need you to you figure it out, basically. And I'm paraphrasing, you figure it out. And I didn't do anything that night. And I woke up the next morning, and the very first thing that I grabbed was the Bible. I don't know why. I do know why. And I just began to read. And it was as if somebody just turned the light on. Like, I'd been walking around in the dark my whole existence, and somebody just turned the light on. And I think those first few months, I told y'all from the pulpit, like, I looked at God and said, if I'm going to follow Jesus, I want to know this Jesus. Like, I don't want to have some reasonable facsimile. I want to know Jesus. And so I just started reading, and I started, making notes, and I started trying to memorize verses, and I just tried to like consume. I was starving, and I was just consuming. And like, it wasn't until a few years later when my wife invited me to church, and I'm like, I don't know about this.
Were you married?
No.
Okay, so you were dating.
Yeah.
Or not even that.
We weren't even that. Like, I was working with her dad, and like, she wanted me to go to church, and so I said, okay. So I went to church, walked through the church for the first time in God only knows how many years, and very first thing that was said to me is, boy, take off the hat. And I was like, bro, are you, first of all, I'm 3 times your size. Don't call me boy. I'm a grown man.
I'm not intimidated.
Yeah. Like, dude, you come up to my armpit. Like, and you're frail. But, the good news is Christy, that's my wife. She grabs my hand and she, come on, let's go. And so we sit in the pew, and the preacher starts preaching, which is Bob. He's coming in the next,
tomorrow.
Day,
yeah.
Tomorrow. Yeah. It just stuck. And then I started putting conditions, as me and Christy started dating and all of that. I said, I'm only going at 11 o'clock. I'm not going to Sunday school. I'm not interested in relationships. I just want to hear what Jesus has to say. And she's like, okay, whatever. She tolerated me. Thank the Lord she tolerated me. I'm so thankful for that. And so, like, progressively, like, she eventually manipulated me. And I will say that she manipulated me 100%. There was no gospel truth. She manipulated me. So I would intentionally try to divert, even though I was a believer, I would try to divert her away from church on Wednesday nights just to spend time with her. And I think she caught on to it, and she's like, if you want to hang out with me on Wednesday nights, then you're gonna come to church on Wednesday nights. I was like, Fine. So the very first time I attended a Wednesday night, they took me to a funeral home because somebody's grandmother passed. And I'm like, seems like a really great time. This is not making me motivated to come on Wednesday nights, you know.
Go Jesus.
Yay. So, I mean, I eventually got plugged into that and started going to, the college, college and career, what they call a college and career at that time. I was probably the career portion of the college and career. And then eventually, like, as me and Christy progressed in our relationship, like, we started teaching Sunday school, and then there was this call to ministry, a few years later, and I look up and I blink and we're leaving. We're packing all of our stuff up and we're moving to the great state of Texas to school, and we move into a 400 square foot apartment.
In Fort Worth.
Oh yeah. It was joy and a peach. Yeah. So I blink and I'm thinking, I'll be honest, I'm thinking. After I graduated my undergrad, I'm thinking, okay, I want to do, I'm thinking church planting. That's what I want to do. And that didn't work out. Like I talked to a professor and he's like, well, we kind of want to shift people to like Montana and Wyoming and different places like that. I'm like, dude, I have nothing in common with people that raise cattle.
Okay.
I'm not a cowboy. I've been in the city my whole life. And he's like, well, I don't, if you want to continue to pursue it, it may change, but, and I said, nah, I forget it. And so, about 3-4 years later, I end up back at our home church as the associate pastor and youth minister. And then, of course, in 2015, I'd finished up my MDiv, and pastor resigned. The pastor that was there resigned, and we're sitting in a meeting, and somebody says, I have no idea why we're searching for a pastor when we got one right here, and
You're looking around trying to find him.
like, where is he? And she puts her hand on my shoulder, and I'm like. And I came home and I'm like, do we really want to do this? Because after I surrendered to the ministry at that church, I remember I was one of the last ones probably there, and I remember walking up into the pulpit, just standing behind the big pulpit that they had at the time, and thinking to myself, I'm so unqualified to be here. I'll be honest. I still feel that way. Nervous, like I'll never be able to do this. And then I found myself back there.
Yeah.
And I think that was God's way of saying, I make you qualified,
Yeah.
Which is good.
I've interviewed a lot of guys that haven't been to seminary.
Yeah.
Cemetery, as we both call it.
It's
And I say that lovingly and teasingly.
I don't a bit.
But for real, Peter did not attend seminary.
That's right.
Nor did Paul. Well, Paul did.
Yeah.
I'll give Paul credit, but the other 11,
Yeah.
other 12 if you count Judas, none of them. They were uneducated. In fact, Acts makes a real big point of that. They marveled seeing that these men were uneducated,
Yes.
but they knew that. I think it says, but they knew that they'd been with Jesus.
Yeah.
And that's probably a bigger difference than education. And I think the Lord really does specialize, maybe even more so. This is not to dismiss anyone who spent 4 years getting their MDiv or their doctorate or whatever. I don't mean that at all, but not to disparage those whom the Lord has called and not sent to school. I think they're equally as called and equally chosen and equally prepared. God doesn't want people who think that they can do it without Him, right?
Well, yeah, I think here's the thing. I think seminary. I loved my time there. It helped. Honestly, it helped mine and my wife's relationship to grow immensely. It's especially in faith,
Right.
Provisions and things like that. I think seminary taught me the value of study, but it didn't teach me how to love people. Like it did. Like when I stepped into that role as youth minister or pastor, my responsibility as a pastor is to love you, to correct you, to love you, to lead you, to guide you. I don't know that seminary necessarily prepared me for that.
Interesting.
I think they gave me the tools. Like they gave me, the languages and the church history and all of those things, and counseling and different areas like that. But, what do you do? What do you do when two church members are mad at each other?
Right.
What do you do when you're I remember this as a youth minister. One of my youth, we were having a D now, and we had to cancel the D now because one of my youth's dad.
Real quick parenthesis for those who don't know, D Now is Discipleship Now. It is it's a weekend experience for youths.
Yeah.
That's kind of intensive, if I understand it. Okay, I'm sorry. Please continue.
No, so we ended up having to cancel the D Now because one of my students' dads got his head ran over in an accident, a motorcycle accident. And so, I show up at the hospital and they're sobbing and they're wanting to know why, and you're trying to find answers, and there are no answers to this. And I don't know that. I mean, and it's not a knock on seminary. I think, like I said, seminary prepared me for a lot of things, but seminary didn't teach me to sit in a swing for an hour and a half. Me and my wife sit in a swing in an hour and a half and just wrap our arms around this young woman and just weep with her and pray for her, and even to this day, and she's married. I got to do her wedding back years ago. Even to this day, she will tell you that was one of the most pivotal moments of her life, and in those moments was where I became her pastor. Like,
wow.
Because I mean, I know it sounds goofy, but that's kind of the role is to fill the gaps, and so. I was there to graduation. When she was getting the awards and all of that, pre-graduation and all of that, I was the one that showed up and cheered her on and stuff like that. Me and my wife were. When she was making dumb decisions, she shows up at our house in tears. And so, like, we navigated through that, and I don't know that anybody ever taught us how to do that.
Right.
It's just what the scriptures say that we should be doing.
Yeah.
That we are to love one another as Christ loved the church. And I just think, I don't know that those are the things that can't necessarily be taught. They're just present. They have to be.
They are, if you don't get it out of seminary and you don't get it out of the Bible, you're probably going to get it from the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that I really do believe that for whatever reason, I'm a glutton for punishment. And again, looking back on my life and looking back on how I strove for just to be loved, what it produced in me is I have a desire to love. Like, because I didn't have that, I want to give that because I know how I felt not receiving it.
Sure.
And so I want to make sure that you know that I love you. Like whether I meet people for the first time or not, I want to make sure that you know that I love you, that I am for you, that I want to see you succeed. And I think that's something that the Holy Spirit has to do in your life. And so I can look at you today and say, I'm so thankful that I grew up in the environment that I grew up, because I see the beauty from ashes, in those things.
Sure.
And so I've had the ability to talk with students that, didn't have a father figure, or students that they grew up in dysfunction, or even men and women that didn't have those things, and being able to connect to them and love them and point them in the direction. And I think that's, and so I can look at you and say, man, I know it sounds ridiculous, but I'm thankful for the abuse. I'm thankful for like the loneliness. I'm thankful that the tears that I cried. I'm thankful for it. I know it sounds stupid, but I'm thankful that I contemplated suicide. I'm thankful for that because it's led me to a place of recognizing the beauty of the gospel and how much it's transformed my life.
Michael Irvin was number 88 at the Cowboys,
Yeah.
wide receiver. And when asked, my understanding is he became a Christian. And I heard an interview with him on the radio, and he said the exact same thing. They asked him if he was sad or regretful for the things that he had done. You know, he was he was running around on his wife. He was doing cocaine. He was getting into all kinds of trouble because he had the money. And he said, absolutely not, because without it, I would not be where I am today.
Yeah.
I've never heard it put that well. I mean, so well. So insightful, maybe. Perspective, I guess, is what it is.
Yeah, it makes you who you are. And I can look at my wife and see how she was raised and see the beauty of how she was raised and how we co-parent and how we exist together and things like that. And so,
interesting.
like, I can look at you and say, I'm thankful that she was raised, because I didn't, Lord knows I didn't have a normal home life, and she had somewhat of a normal home life. And so when we had even when we first got married, I'm like, okay, what do we do now? Like, what happens when we get into an argument? What happens, and I didn't, because growing up, like, I never saw any of that.
Yeah.
Or when we had our first kid, like when we had Riley, dude, I held her for probably maybe a minute and a half, and I handed her back to Christy, and I went outside because I had a panic attack, and I said, Lord, I don't know how to be a dad.
Right.
I don't have a clue. So, like, you're gonna have to help a brother out here.
Better start training now.
Yeah. So and so even the way, and I know it sounds crazy, but even the way that like I've learned in Scripture, the things that I've learned about Jesus and learned about the personhood of God. Like, that's helped me navigate and try to be a good dad. Mm-hmm. Now, listen, I'm not painting a picture of perfection, because my kids would highly disagree.
They'd laugh at either one of us.
Oh, 100%.
I'm with you.
But I want my kids to know that as a dad, I'm there for them and I love them, and there are moments and glimpses, even as teenagers, I get to have like theological conversations with them.
Yep.
It's so much fun.
Yep.
And helping them understand the gospel, understand humanity, and where does that fit? Like, one of the things I've always taught my kids is, that unsaved people are going to act unsaved.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to act any other way.
Right.
And so it's helped them with living their life out for the gospel. Like, that's the first question I ask them. Well, so-and-so was mean to me. Well, do you think she knows Jesus? I don't know. Well, unsaved people are going to act unsaved. Now, it can be a cop-out. It can be. But it's a truthful cop-out.
Right, yeah. Well, yeah. No, I think you're right. I was talking to a buddy the other day. He's a pastor, ironically. And I know what it was. We were talking about the tornadoes that came through.
Yeah.
And he said the clouds were very angry, and one set missed him by, I think he said 11 miles, 17 miles. It was very close.
Wow.
He said, I don't know what we did to make it angry. And I said, I think you're going to have to talk to your great-great-great-great-grandfather Adam about that.
Yeah.
Because it's a bit of a cop-out, but it's a very truthful.
It's a very truthful cop-out.
Cop-out, right? We live in a world of sin. Why would you expect hurricanes to hit only him and not me?
Right.
And why would you expect your children to have it rosy
Right.
when their friends are unsaved.
Sure.
No, I think you're onto something.
Well, and because I know that my kids are going to deal with difficulties. I know that they're going to deal with stubborn people. I know. Listen, if you exist in life, you're going to deal with people. You're going to deal with people that it's all about them. It's whatever, it's a lot of different things. And so I think the goal is I want you to understand, and it's not just for my kids, it's for my congregation as well. Like when you're out and about, understand unsaved people are going to act unsaved.
Mm-hmm.
And
why would you expect anything different?
If you go into with that mentality, then you're not going to be disappointed when they act unsaved. Like you're not going to be, so I don't know. Like
it just solves so many problems, right?
When I was lost, and I was doing lost things.
Yes.
And you're not going to, no one is going to look at me when I was lost and go, there goes a Christian man. Clearly, because of my fruit, you would know that I was not saved.
Then they were saying, this boy needs Jesus.
That's exactly right. I don't know if they were saying that when I was 7 or 8, when I was clogging the toilets, but...
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Ministry on the Move. I've been your host, Chris McNeil. To learn more about the McNeils, you can find us on the web at mcneilmusic.com, mcneilmusic.tv, themcneilproject.com, on Facebook at The McNeils, YouTube at The McNeils. We are on all of the usual suspects. God bless you. We'll see you next time. Dear Math, grow up and solve your own problems.